What if the person responsible for finding Nancy Guthrie was the one supporting the kidnapper? What if the man who stood in front of cameras gave press conference after press conference and told the American public he was doing everything possible? What if that same man had been suspended 8 separate times as a police officer? What if he had lied about all of it on his resume for 4 decades?
She came home at 9:50 p.m. The garage door closed behind her. The neighborhood was quiet. Everything looked normal. But something happened inside that house in the hours that followed. Something the cameras almost caught. At 1:47 a.m., her front door camera stopped transmitting. At 2:12 a.m., motion was detected on the property. At 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker stopped syncing data. 41 minutes. That is your window. Whatever happened to 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie happened inside those 41 minutes. She never came out the other side of them. Nancy lives alone in the Catalina foothills on the east side of Tucson, Arizona. It is the kind of neighborhood where people feel safe. It is the kind of neighborhood where nothing like this is supposed to happen. She is someone's mother. She is Savannah Guthrie's mother. And she has been missing since February 1st, 2026. Now, we need to talk about the man assigned to find her. His name is Sheriff Chris Nanos of Pima County, Arizona. He stood in front of cameras. He gave press conference after press conference. He looked directly into the lens and told the American public he was doing everything possible. Before we go further, if you want every update on this case the moment it breaks, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Stay with us through this entire video, because what we found at the end changes everything that came before it. Here is what he was not telling you. And here is Promise 1. By the time this video ends, you will know exactly what kind of man has been running this investigation from the very first hour. Because the first thing you need to understand is what happened on the ground that night. And the people inside that department are finally talking. Here is what happened inside the investigation. The very first responders to Nancy Guthrie's home were not experienced detectives. A source close to the investigation told Brian Enton of News Nation something that should stop you cold. You have decisions made by people that will install friends and people that can do stuff for them, opposed to people that are there on their merit and can do the job correctly. The supervisor Nanos placed in charge of the homicide unit had never investigated a homicide. Not one, never. And Nanos put that person there anyway. The investigation was framed as a search and rescue operation, not a criminal case. That is the wrong lens. And every hour they spent looking in the wrong direction was an hour the perpetrator used to get further away. Detectives returned to Nancy's home multiple times. That tells you something critical. Evidence was not collected properly on the first visit. Separate units inside the same department were not sharing information with each other. Witnesses were interviewed 4 and 5 times by different teams. Nobody was tracking who had been where. Sergeant Aaron Cross is the president of the Pima County Sheriff's Deputies Union. He spoke directly to Brian Enton on the record. He called the first week of this investigation one word: a mess. A source speaking under protected anonymity to avoid retaliation put it this way: he ruined a great department. And then came the FBI. Kash Patel is the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He went on Sean Hannity's podcast in May of 2026 and said this on the record. The first 48 hours of anyone's disappearance are the most critical, and for 4 days, we were kept out of the investigation. 4 days. He had hundreds of agents ready. He had a plane sitting on the runway. He had the best forensic laboratory in the world waiting at Quantico in Virginia. The DNA went to a private lab in Florida instead. Why? That answer goes back 10 years, and it has nothing to do with the case. Because to understand why the FBI was turned away, you have to understand what happened in 2016, and what Chris Nanos has never forgiven. By the end of this chapter, you will understand exactly why a personal grudge may have cost this investigation its best chance. In 2016, the FBI opened a RICO investigation into the Pima County Sheriff's Office, misuse of funds. One department chief was indicted. A second died by suicide. Chris Nanos, serving as interim sheriff at the time, was implicated. He was not charged, but the damage was done. Local Tucson station KGUN9 documented what happened next. Nanos went on camera. The contempt on his face was open. He referred to his own detectives as the real police. You could hear exactly what he thought of the federal agents who had come into his house. Sergeant Aaron Cross told Brian Enton directly, "Nanos never forgave the FBI for that 2016 investigation." And in his professional opinion, that resentment shaped every decision Nanos made after Nancy disappeared. Here is what that resentment cost this investigation. In order. 1. The FBI was kept out for 4 critical days, the most important days of any missing persons case. 2. Hundreds of federal agents sat on standby while 96 county detectives ran a disorganized operation. 3. A plane on the runway with DNA evidence bound for Quantico was turned away. The DNA went to Florida instead. 4. The moment the surveillance image of the perpetrator was released, Cross said the case should have been handed to the FBI entirely. It was not. 5. Brian Enton asked Cross directly, "Would Nanos ever voluntarily hand this case over?" Cross answered without hesitation. "No, never. The size of this man's ego is difficult to describe." Every deputy in the union voted no confidence in their own sheriff. 100%. Dr. Matt Hines, a Democratic supervisor on the Pima County Board, went on record. "This is accountability for a guy who has evaded accountability for decades and is himself a public safety threat." Both parties. One conclusion. He has to go. Sergeant Cross said the size of this man's ego is difficult to describe. Drop in the comments. What word would you use for someone who puts their ego above finding a missing 84-year-old woman? But the Board of Supervisors did not yet know the worst of it. We need to go back to 1976, because everything you just watched makes a completely different kind of sense when you know who this man really was before Arizona ever gave him a badge. Chris Nanos joined the El Paso Police Department in 1976. Between 1979 and 1982, the department suspended him 8 separate times. 8. Here is what those suspensions were for: violating department orders, making off-duty threats, illegal gambling, habitual tardiness, insubordination, 2 additional violations, and then the one that will stay with you. Pima County Supervisor Dr. Matt Hines stated publicly that Nanos beat a handcuffed man almost to death with a flashlight. That man went to the intensive care unit. A handcuffed man, already in custody, unable to defend himself, beaten until he needed intensive care. In 1982, El Paso gave Nanos a choice: resign or face termination. He resigned. Fox News confirmed through Arizona Public Records that he did not properly disclose this on his subsequent employment applications. He buried it for 40 years. If this is the first time you are hearing any of this, share this video with one person right now. This is the man who ran the investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. On December 11, 2025, in a deposition taken as part of a lawsuit filed by Sergeant Cross, a lawyer asked Nanos one direct question under oath. "Have you ever been suspended as a law enforcement officer?" Nanos said no. He shouldn't even have been a cop in Arizona ever in the first place. Those are the words of Sergeant Cross. The deputies' union filed a letter requesting the Arizona Attorney General open a felony perjury investigation into their own sheriff. A felony. The man who told America he was doing everything possible could not tell the truth under oath about his own record. A man who lied under oath about his own history ran every press conference in this case. Tell us in the comments. Do you believe a single thing he said at those cameras? And Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The board has started the removal process. The union has asked for a felony investigation. The FBI director has spoken publicly, but none of that brings her home. Here is where the case stands right now. 4 to 5 detectives have been physically moved to work out of the FBI building in Tucson. Sergeant Cross called this a positive development. Investigators are finally out from under command interference. But Cross was honest with Brian Enton. There is no major new break. There is no working suspect theory. An anonymous source inside the department said it plainly. No direct suspect right now. No name on the table. And then this source said something that has stayed with us. Not with how the investigation has gone so far. They were not saying this case is impossible to solve. They were saying the early failures made it harder than it ever should have been. One man made those decisions. You now know who he is. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has a pacemaker. She depends on daily medication. She is Savannah Guthrie's mother, and Savannah has stepped away from her anchor desk multiple times just to get through the weight of what her family is carrying. Nancy has been missing since February. Her daughter has had to step away from her job just to cope. What do you think needs to happen next? Drop it below. If this video gave you something you could not find anywhere else, share it. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because when the next break happens in this case, we will be here, and we will say plainly what others will not say. We are not moving on, not while she is still missing.